The formal rent increase notice slid across my workbench was accompanied by my father's arrogant demand for an extra $1,500 a month to subsidize my brother's bankrupt craft distillery. My mother sneered that as an unmarried woman, I didn't need savings anyway, so I should feel honored to rescue my golden child brother from financial ruin. I quietly packed up my specialized industrial robotics lab, surrendered the keys, and walked away. My name is Alex Green. To understand how a ruthless 500% rent increase in Richmond, Virginia triggered the complete financial ruin and legal forfeiture of my father's real estate portfolio, you have to look inside the deeply manipulative dynamic of the Green family. In our home, family was never about mutual respect or shared support. It was a rigid hierarchy where my labor was exploited to fuel my brother's unearned privileges. My father, Robert Green, was a former middle management bureaucrat who inherited a 15,000 square foot light industrial flex building known as Green Commercial Plaza in the historic Scott's Addition district of Richmond. Robert viewed himself as a brilliant real estate tycoon, though his entire income depended on collecting rent from small local businesses while neglecting basic building maintenance. My mother, Cynthia, was an enabler who spent her days managing Robert's image and convincing herself that our family belonged to Richmond's commercial elite. My younger brother, Brandon, was 2 years younger than me and lived as the undisputed golden child. Pampered, reckless, and utterly devoid of work ethic, Brandon was raised to believe that effort was beneath him. When Brandon announced 3 years ago that he wanted to become a master distiller, Robert mortgaged his personal home to give Brandon $300,000 in seed capital to launch Green Craft Spirits and Tap Room inside the largest 4,000 square foot bay of the commercial plaza. Brandon knew nothing about fermentation chemistry, supply chain logistics, or commercial accounting. He spent his startup capital on custom copper stills imported from Germany, custom gold leaf signage, plush leather seating, and extravagant launch parties for his fraternity friends. Within 18 months, Brandon's distillery was hemorrhaging $12,000 a month, drowning in unpaid vendor invoices, and generating virtually zero retail sales. I chose a completely different path in life. From a young age, I was fascinated by precision mechanics, microelectronics, and automated industrial systems. While Brandon was bailed out of high school academic failures, I earned dual degrees in mechanical engineering and applied financial mathematics from Virginia Tech, graduating with highest honors. At 28, I was the sole founder and chief executive officer of Vanguard Systems Automation, a specialized engineering firm that designed, calibrated, and maintained robotic assembly components for medical device manufacturers across the Mid-Atlantic. When I started my company 4 years ago, I needed a secure space for high-precision testing. My father offered to lease me a vacant, derelict 1,500 square foot bay at the rear of Green Commercial Plaza. The space was an abandoned warehouse storage unit with leaking pipes, exposed wiring, crumbling masonry, and rotting drywall. Under a basic month-to-month commercial tenancy agreement, Robert agreed to let me rent the bay for $500 a month. I invested $80,000 of my own earned capital into transforming that dilapidated bay into a high-precision, climate-controlled, dust-free laboratory equipped with high-precision optical calibration rigs, reinforced concrete flooring, sealed anti-static epoxy coating, and upgraded 3-phase industrial power lines. For 4 years, I paid my rent on the first of every month, never missing a single payment, while quietly building my company into a highly profitable enterprise with 3 full-time technical employees and contracts with major pharmaceutical manufacturers. Meanwhile, Robert and Cynthia ignored my accomplishments. When visitors walked through the commercial plaza, Robert proudly pointed out Brandon's empty, polished craft tap room while dismissing my high-tech lab as Alexia's little hobby shop. The breaking point occurred on a crisp Tuesday morning in early November. Brandon's financial mismanagement had finally pushed Green Commercial Plaza to the brink of total collapse. Regional First Bank, which held the $650,000 master commercial mortgage on the plaza, issued Robert a formal notice of default. Brandon had failed to pay his $4,000 monthly taproom rent for over a year, leaving Robert unable to meet his monthly mortgage service obligations to the bank. Instead of forcing Brandon to liquidate his failing business or sell his luxury sports car, Robert decided to solve the problem by preying on me. I was standing at my optical calibration bench, adjusting a laser guidance module for a medical client, when the heavy metal door of my lab slammed open. Robert strode into the clean room without wearing protective shoe covers, flanked by my mother, Cynthia, and a disheveled, smirk-wearing Brandon. Robert slapped a single sheet of paper onto my clean workbench, right over my technical schematics. "Alexia, sign this new lease agreement immediately," Robert ordered, his voice echoing loudly off the sterile walls. "Effective December 1st, your monthly rent is increasing from $500 to $2,000 a month. That's a $1,500 monthly increase." I set my calibration tools down carefully, staring at my father in disbelief. $1,500? Dad, this is a 1,500 square foot storage bay in an aging building. Commercial market rent in this district is $8 a square foot. You're demanding $20 a square foot for a space I personally renovated with my own money? Robert scoffed, crossing his arms aggressively. "Market rates don't matter in this family. Your brother's distillery is going through a temporary cash flow crunch, and the bank is breathing down my neck for mortgage payments. Brandon is building an iconic luxury brand for the Green name. You're making plenty of money with your little computer parts business, so it's your responsibility to step up and bankroll your brother." My mother, Cynthia, stepped forward, her voice dripping with condescending disdain. "Honestly, Alexia, don't be so greedy. You're an unmarried woman with no family to support. What do you need all that extra revenue for anyway? Brandon has a wife and a high society lifestyle to maintain. You should be happy to help your brother succeed." Brandon leaned against my equipment rack, flashing an arrogant smirk. "Yeah, sis, it's called family unity. Once my single malt whiskey wins a national award next year, I'll pay you back. Until then, just consider the extra $1,500 your contribution to the Green empire." I looked at the three of them. My father, who viewed me as a cash cow, my mother, who considered my hard work worthless, and my brother, who felt entitled to steal my earnings to fund his fake luxury lifestyle. "I am not signing an illegal 400% rent increase to fund a failing distillery, Robert," I said, keeping my voice completely calm and level. "I have a valid month-to-month tenancy, and I pay fair market value." Robert's face turned purple with rage. He slammed his fist on my workbench, rattling my precision lenses. "You don't get a vote, Alexia," Robert roared. "This is my building. Either you sign this lease and start paying $2,000 a month by Friday, or I will lock this door, terminate your tenancy, and impound all your equipment to satisfy back rent." "Is that your final word, Dad?" I asked, looking him straight in the eyes. "That is my final word," Robert sneered. "Pay up or get out." I looked down at the lease paper, then looked back at my father. I didn't yell. I didn't shed a single tear. I didn't give them the satisfaction of an argument. "Noted," I said softly. Robert smirked, believing he had intimidated me into submission. "Good. Have the signed document on my desk by 5 o'clock on Friday." He turned on his heel and walked out, followed by Cynthia and Brandon. They assumed I was weak. They assumed that because I had invested $80,000 into retrofitting the lab space, I was trapped and would pay whatever extortion fee they demanded rather than risk moving. They had no idea who they were dealing with. The moment the heavy door closed behind them, I pulled out my phone and dialed my lead corporate real estate attorney, Julian Mercer. "Julian," I said calmly, "my landlord just issued an improper 5-day demand for an unbargained rent increase accompanied by threats of illegal self-help eviction and commercial asset seizure." "Alexia, your landlord is your father, correct?" "He was my father until 10 minutes ago," I replied coldly. "Now he is simply a non-compliant commercial landlord. I want to execute emergency relocation protocol immediately." Over the next 72 hours, while Robert and Brandon celebrated what they believed was a victory at a downtown steakhouse, I put my relocation plan into motion. On Thursday evening at 6 o'clock, 2 heavy-duty industrial transport trucks and a specialized team of certified rigging technicians pulled up to the rear loading dock of Green Commercial Plaza. Working through the night, my team carefully dismantled, packed, and loaded every single piece of calibrated machinery, optical testing gear, server racks, and workbench infrastructure into the climate-controlled vehicles. By 3 o'clock on Friday morning, my original bay was stripped down to the bare concrete floor and concrete walls. I had personally secured a new 5-year commercial lease at the James River Technology Park, a premier Class A commercial science complex in downtown Richmond, featuring high-speed fiber optics, 24-hour private security, and dedicated backup power generators. Before leaving the vacant bay for the last time, I placed my set of keys onto the empty floor, along with a formal legal notice of lease termination drafted by attorney Julian Mercer, citing constructive eviction and landlord interference. At 9 o'clock on Friday morning, Robert walked down the alley of Green Commercial Plaza, expecting to find a signed lease and a check for $2,000 taped to my door. Instead, he found an open and empty warehouse bay. Panicked, Robert rushed inside, staring in horror at the bare concrete. The high-value equipment was gone. The specialized lab was gone. The monthly $500 rent check was gone. And the potential $1,500 subsidy he needed to save Brandon's business had completely vanished into thin air. Robert frantically called my phone 17 times. I let every call go straight to voicemail. When he finally sent a text message screaming, "Where is my rent money? You can't just leave," I sent back a single, brief reply. "I vacated pursuant to your demand. Have a nice day." Without my $500 in rent, and with no one willing to lease a bare, unheated storage unit in Scott's Addition, Robert's monthly income dropped off a cliff. 2 weeks later, the financial trap closed around him. Regional First Bank issued a formal demand for immediate cure regarding the default on the $650,000 master mortgage covering Green Commercial Plaza. Robert owed $45,000 in back payments and penalties, and he didn't have $45 in his bank account. Desperate, Robert attempted to apply for an emergency commercial refinancing loan with 3 different regional lenders. But every bank rejected his application, citing Brandon's unpaid rent, the building's severe code violations, and Robert's terrible credit rating. What my father didn't know was that while he was begging local banks for loans, my financial legal team was working behind the scenes. As a certified financial mathematician and owner of a profitable corporation, I held significant liquid reserves in a private investment holding entity called Vanguard Capital Assets LLC. Through attorney Julian Mercer, I contacted the vice president of distressed debt liquidation at Regional First Bank. Regional First Bank is holding a non-performing $650,000 commercial note on Green Commercial Plaza, Julian presented to the bank's asset committee. The borrower is in material default, the building is physically deteriorating, and foreclosure proceedings will take 8 months. My client is prepared to purchase the master mortgage note in full, for cash today, at a 10% discount. Eager to remove a toxic loan from their balance sheet before the fiscal quarter ended, the bank agreed. On Tuesday afternoon, Vanguard Capital Assets LLC paid $585,000 in cash to purchase the note. The assignment of mortgage was officially recorded at the Richmond City Circuit Court Clerk's office. I was no longer just Robert's former tenant. I was his sole master lender and mortgage holder, and I immediately initiated formal judicial foreclosure proceedings due to monetary default. 10 days later, unaware that I owned his debt, Robert called a frantic family meeting at the empty tap room inside Green Commercial Plaza. Desperate to find a way out, Robert sent me an email begging me to meet him, claiming he had an urgent business proposal that would reconcile our family. At 2 o'clock on Thursday afternoon, I walked into the drafty, silent tap room of Green Craft Spirits. Robert, Cynthia, and Brandon were sitting around a wooden cable covered in unpaid bills and bank notices. Robert looked exhausted, his hair disheveled and his clothes rumpled. Cynthia was pale while Brandon sat quietly staring at his phone. When Robert saw me walk in, wearing a tailored charcoal executive suit and carrying a slim leather briefcase, his face lit up with a mixture of relief and desperate arrogance. "Alexia, you came!" Robert shouted, standing up quickly. "Thank God. Look, we need to put this foolishness behind us. The bank sent a final notice yesterday, threatening to auction the building off in 30 days. "I know," I said smoothly, standing 10 feet from their table. "Here is what we are going to do." Robert rushed on, pacing back and forth. "I found a way to save us. You are going to move your lab back into your old bay immediately, but instead of $2,000, you will pay $3,000 a month. In exchange, I will give you a 5% non-voting stake in Brandon's distillery." Brandon looked up, nodding eagerly. "Yes, sis. Once we get past this bank issue, my craft vodka is going to blow up. You'll be part owner of a national brand." Cynthia smiled nervously, clasping her hands. "See, Alexia? Your father is giving you a seat at the executive table. You save the building, and we stay a happy, successful family." I stared at the 3 of them, feeling nothing but profound pity for their delusion. "Robert," I said, using his first name with sharp clarity, "I didn't come here to negotiate a lease." Robert froze, his smile fading. "What do you mean?" I opened my leather briefcase, pulled out a thick packet of certified court documents, and placed them onto the table directly over Brandon's unpaid bills. "These are documents executed by the Richmond Circuit Court," I announced. my voice carrying total authority through the empty building. Effective 15 days ago, Regional First Bank assigned the master commercial mortgage on Green Commercial Plaza to Vanguard Capital Assets, LLC. Robert blinked in confusion, taking a step forward. Vanguard Capital? That's the holding company for your engineering firm. That is correct. I bought your $650,000 debt from the bank for cash. I am your sole lender. Cynthia gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Brandon dropped his phone onto the table. Robert's face turned ghostly white. His knees visibly shook as he clutched the edge of the table. You bought my mortgage? Alexia, why would you do that? Because you defaulted on your loan, Robert. And because my holding company has issued an unappealable order of mortgage acceleration and notice of foreclosure sale. This entire commercial plaza will be sold at public auction on the courthouse steps in 14 days. No! Robert shrieked, tears of terror bursting from his eyes as he slammed his hands on the table. You can't do this. I am your father. You can't foreclose on your own father's building. 6 weeks ago, you stood in my lab and told me that market rates didn't matter, that my hard work was worthless, and that you would lock my doors and destroy my business to fund your son's vanity. I said, my voice cold as ice. You taught me that business is strictly about power and contract enforcement. I simply learned the lesson. Brandon jumped out of his chair, yelling angrily. Alexia, you bitch! What about my distillery? I have $400,000 invested in these tanks. I turned to Brandon, looking at him with absolute detachment. Pursuant to Virginia commercial eviction law, an order of immediate vacant possession has been signed by the sheriff. You have 48 hours to remove your personal belongings. All fixed industrial equipment, including your copper stills, has been seized as security against your father's defaulted debt. Brandon collapsed back into his chair, burying his face in his hands, sobbing uncontrollably. My mother, Cynthia, rushed toward me, tears streaming down her face, begging frantically, Alexia, please, have mercy. We'll lose everything. Your father worked his whole life for this building. Where are we supposed to go? You should have thought about that before you treated your daughter like disposable property, I replied. I picked up my briefcase, turned on my heel, and walked out of the taproom, leaving the shattered, sobbing remains of my family behind me forever. The public auction took place 2 weeks later on the steps of the Richmond Circuit Courthouse. With no other buyers willing to take on a property burdened by code violations and back taxes, my holding company purchased Green Commercial Plaza for the price of the underlying debt. I immediately hired a commercial contractor, renovated the entire complex, and converted it into a high-yield technology business incubator, leasing bays to legitimate tech startups for $12,000 a month in net rental income. The destruction of my family's financial illusion was absolute. Unable to pay the debt guarantees he had signed for Brandon's distillery, Robert was forced to declare personal Chapter 7 bankruptcy. He lost his personal home, his luxury car, and his entire life savings. Robert and Cynthia were forced to downsize into a tiny one-bedroom apartment in an outer suburb of Richmond, living entirely off Robert's modest monthly government pension. Brandon's craft distillery was completely liquidated at a sheriff's auction. Stripped of his fake executive status and unable to secure credit, Brandon was forced to take an entry-level night shift job stocking pallets at a commercial freight warehouse to pay his personal debts. Meanwhile, my firm, Vanguard Systems Automation, expanded rapidly. Within 2 years, we opened a second facility in Northern Virginia, employing 15 engineers and generating millions in annual revenue. Sitting in my corner office at the James River Technology Park on a quiet Friday evening, looking out over the illuminated skyline of Richmond, I feel a deep, unshakable sense of accomplishment and peace. I proved that real success isn't given by entitled parents or built on family exploitation. It is earned through relentless dedication, technical brilliance, and the courage to walk away from anyone who tries to pull you down.